what the Church of Scientology is so afraid of.
This is SPTV.
Hey, I tried not to totally botch the intro. First time actually doing that. So, woo, yay me.
Nice. Well done. Well done.
Thank you very much.
We're here.
Well,
We're
Liz
live.
We're live. Liz and I are both on together.
Yeah.
Thanks for anyone that can join us. We'll start getting up with the comments and stuff here in a minute. I just wanted to take a minute and show everybody our channels if they're not already familiar. Let's see. Here we have Liz Gale, which you can find her at Liz Gale Gale. And then mine, which is really the original Mike Brown 101. And there you have it.
There we are.
Here we are. So this should be fun tonight. I'm going to kind of pull up the comments. So apologize for the clunkiness of all this, but I'm sure we'll figure it out kind of as we go. And no, I'm really so it's going to be not only Liz, but Liz and Theo too, right? She's cutting him off. So her doggo is definitely a big talker. So that's going to be kind of fun. So no big deal. I have a dog myself. My dog Max, he's a Weimaraner, so he's full of energy as well.
It's the holiday shopping. I went a little wild on Amazon last night, and I think my packages have arrived.
Ooh, good times. Awesome. So we wanted to take a little bit of time and kind of talk about and I know there's been some other discussions on some of the other channels where some other, former Scientologists and Sea Org members had talked about parenting and then kind of reflecting back on our childhoods. And I thought that was such an interesting conversation because we both had Scientology upbringings. You even kind of more so than I did. I kind of got into it a little bit later. And then you experienced the entire Delphi Academy, kind of that away at school, boarding school situation when my life kind of then went from being a public Scientologist, kind of in a middle-class upbringing, to then being thrust into the Sea organization in Los Angeles and then the International Ranch, and then kind of groomed to move up to international management, whether I really wanted to or not. But the way we were dealt with as kids was way, way different. So I just thought that would be such an interesting topic to go over and reflect back on, like now that we have children, some of the struggles and then some of the methodology we're trying to now deal with as opposed to the way we were dealt with, because we don't want to have a repeat. At least I do not very, very much.
Yeah, I don't. I've worked hard to make sure that there isn't a repeat.
Yeah. For me, like there's been a lot of books that have been helpful for me. And one of the things that was hard for me was looking at sources of information that were not Hubbard sources of information. At first, that felt really, even though I was out, approaching something with an open mind was not easy. And luckily, I have an amazing partner and spouse that is my wife, Emily, is there to help in a lot of ways that I'm not able to deal with stuff where I would make bad decisions, kind of reflexively going back to how my childhood might have been. She's kind of the voice of reason, like, hey, we should go about things in a certain way, and kind of pointing out some of my failures and helping guide me in certain directions. But she was always the one to have like the books about how, what to do and what to expect when you're expecting, and kind of every stage of life. She's kind of, deep diving into that and kind of dragging me, sometimes kicking and screaming along with her. But now that I've gotten into it, it's so much better. And it's was it hard for you to get into that, like to accept other forms of information?
Yes and no. I think when I was in Scientology and I was really believing it, and things were kind of going well in my family, early childhood, I thought Scientology had all the answers to family and child rearing. But then my own family didn't do well with Scientology. Like, we had some tragedies, and that made me question. So long story short, I actually got a degree in child and family studies because eventually, when I made that switch of I want more information, I wanted all the information I could possibly get.
Yeah.
So I think that was really helpful for me, just knowing early childhood education, knowing what to expect from children, what's age appropriate. I don't know, there was so much that I was not exposed to in Scientology, as you know. It's just very black and white. You do the same thing with every child. Every
Mhm.
situation is treated the same way with, whether it's your conditions or writing up your OWs or however, there's only so much tech. It's just the same stuff applied to everybody. And that's not really how children are. Children
Right.
develop at their own pace. They develop across, many fields of development, physical, social, emotional, intellectual, and it's not all black and white.
Yeah, that's so true. Like the book I'm reading right now, it's by a psychologist. Her name is Becky Kennedy, and the
Okay.
name of the book is Good Inside.
Oh.
It's an amazing book, and if anyone is just looking at options for raising children and how to deal with that, I love the concept because it's at such stark contrast to a lot of religious beliefs in if is a person at basically good or bad.
Mm.
The whole thing in Scientology that we were told from a very young age is man is basically good. And that sounds really great, but in practice, what that meant was you have misunderstood words, you have overts constantly, you're
Mhm.
in trouble, and they're trying to get you to the point of actually being good through these Scientology processes. But even though they say man is basically good, the feel I always got was we're actually bad and we need to be fixed.
I got that same same message because you're always trying to live up to some sort of standard or some sort of ideal perfection situation, and anything less than that, more Scientology needs to be applied. There's always like more to do, work harder, be better.
Yeah,
Um, and it sucks because that's the dangling carrot that the adults get too. They just,
right.
I think, don't realize what's happening because it's always, "Oh, you finished OT3, boom, OT4, OT5, OT6, you gotta do your Ls, you gotta do all these different things," and it's that dangling carrot of, "You'll be perfect when." And kids pick up on that message as well, that you're
Mhm.
just, if you maybe work harder, like I said, apply more Scientology, maybe you'll get there one day.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. But along with that, emotional response. So like a kid's acting out and you're trying to deal with like they're doing this the entire time, they're beholden to us as parents. And this is one thing,
Mhm.
me reflecting back on how jacked up my childhood actually was coming from when I actually have children. So me
Yeah.
looking back and I'm like, oh, they're 8 years old now, and I'm like, my parents were putting me in session and having me audited when I was 8 years old, and I'm
Right.
looking at my children and saying I would never let that happen. And then my
Mhm.
oldest, that's now at the age when I was in, like, a cadet in the PAC organization, up like, about to go up to that international ranch, doing manual labor and working, uh, they to me still look like children, which they are. And I
They
was
are.
like, at this point, like, when I would reflect back on my early childhood, I don't see a kid as much as I saw a young Sea Org member in my mind who was being told with your emotional challenges and stuff that you need to not express those emotions. The whole thing of, kind of, yeah, it's almost like they're trying to make a cookie cutter example of the perfect person that is
Mhm.
emotionally unavailable and just like perfect in whatever the definition of that is to the human emotion and reaction. That's actually a
Mhm.
negative thing. But with my children, when I try to apply that, like, stop doing something, they just double down and they just do it more. But when I try to connect with them on their emotions,
Yeah.
find out what's going on, why are you feeling that way, what are you doing,
Right.
then we have a lot better response than try to figure out what the root of the problem is. And that was, I don't I, we were just a big pile of kids, but then as for the same time, like, there was no interest in our emotional needs. That was left to the
Correct.
organization, and I'm guessing in your case was left to the school organization to deal with.
It was definitely left to the Delphian school to and they use L. Ron Hubbard. I mean, they're
Mhm.
like a mini Sea Org. I've come to realize that so many of the ways that I lived while at Delphi was modeled after the Sea Organization. For me, I notice now such a stark comparison of, let's say, early childhood education today. There's these ideas that children, that The scientific standard is young children learn through play,
Mhm.
which is so different than anything I had ever learned in Scientology. Because in Scientology, even though they say playing is, high toned, there's really never any time for that. Everything's very serious and, getting your stats up and getting things done, especially if you are being raised by the organization itself or in a
Mhm.
cadet org. And, you have products. You are part of the machine.
Yeah.
And if you don't reach those targets with those products, whether as a kid it's tiles scrubbed on the floor or books read, doesn't matter. It's so for that, there's not a lot of room, in my opinion, and from my experience, for a proper social emotional development. There's no nurturing there. You're just expected to be an adult as soon as your body catches up with you. And that's insane. I
Oh, it is.
mean,
Yeah.
truly, that's not how human beings thrive. That's not how our development thrives. So,
No, I agree with that completely, and, like, I remember because we would have to do that what they refer to as Chinese school. It's
right,
not that's not a slur, like, it's when a person, says something and everyone kinda responds back, and they do this as a training drill over and
right.
over again to remember certain concepts and, actions, and I've done so much of it that this stuff is ingrained in my head. I'll never be able to get rid of some of these things, but one of the things is the definition of play, which is just a very that L. Ron Hubbard came up with, and he said that
Mhm.
play is work without a purpose.
Ugh,
That's his definition of play,
yes.
work without a purpose.
Mhm,
So, with respect to children that are like, we just naturally, they're inquisitive, they want to go out there and play,
mhm,
they want to interact with their environment. There's a lot of sensory inputs where they want to, like, I need to touch the thing, play with the thing, mess it up,
mhm,
fix it, do all of these things. Ultimately, if it's my children, make a huge mess and then leave it there. And then we like, hey, we need to get you to clean it up afterwards. But that's all part of the process. But for us, the play was not an authorized activity.
right.
There was a very short period of time when we went up to this international ranch where they actually had this thing which was called free time in our schedule, where we could go and kind of explore this big
Mhm,
property where we were on. And that quickly got changed to either physical education or something else, but they couldn't call it either playtime or free time. They said it was off policy to do that. It didn't conform with what a SEERG member was supposed to do. So from a very young age, even in the cadet organization, we were our parents were largely absent, which,
mhm,
as a boarding school kid, your parents
mhm.
were
Same
absent
thing.
too. I don't
Mhm.
know if they were available probably on the phone now and then, but ultimately
Yeah,
you were at school, and I bet you were required to take care of yourself and deal with your problems and not be a problem to a certain degree.
that's
That's
about sums it up.
They're like, "Hey, we're
How'd
paying for
you
you
know
to be there
that?
and do this." Well, I mean, that's how it was for our parents
Yeah.
who were on post.
Yes,
The same
exactly.
thing.
Same thing, yeah.
Don't create a problem for your parents. So now we're
Mhm.
in this organization, and you are then having to exchange for your existence there as a child. So
Yes.
children that are elementary, middle school ages are sitting there like doing work in order to justify their existence for them to have
Mhm.
very substandard living conditions, food conditions, and education. If I hazard to even call it education, most of it's focused on Hubbard stuff, but
Mhm.
the play and the interaction very much became work completion and accomplishment based off of what was needed by the organization more than anything else.
Right.
And
Right. It was like your job to play for that period of time.
right, yeah, and that is not healthy. That is not healthy at
No,
all.
it's not healthy. And the other thing is, how many breaks different children have different attention spans depending on their ages and are actually more effective learning and more effective at completing tasks if they are, if their needs are taken into consideration. So
Mhm.
it takes a real special kind of messed up mind, in my opinion, to really say, I'm going to apply the same thing to every single child, no matter what.
Yeah.
Good. I'm hearing another dog, my neighbor's dog. Um,
They're talking.
I'm on high alert. uh, I forgot what I was saying, but I
Well,
just
you're
think it's
saying each
cruel
kid,
to
the
expect that.
one size fits all approach to how to handle children.
Right, exactly. And the concept of age appropriate behavior and expectations is another thing that really blew my mind because Of course, you would never ask, a 5-year-old to complete calculus. You would
Mhm.
ask a 5-year-old to do something else that is appropriate to their age and ability. And there's really none of that in Scientology. You could be 6 and they're like, "You need to save the planet. Go for it. Here's a shovel." You
Right.
know?
And
And
you're
the hours that you're supposed to work as well are, particularly in the, cadet org and the Sea Org, are brutal. They're not appropriate for a developing young body.
right. Absolutely. Yeah, some of it was just crazy. We have some interesting comments. I'm going to star some of them if we want to just as we're going through, just
Yeah,
kind of
for sure.
take on some of these just so we can kind of talk through. And again, thanks to everybody for your patience as I fumble through trying to do this. So Rachel made it in on time. Thanks, Rachel. Good to see you. Here we have.
Will you take over for a second while I
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah,
deal with my dog? He's been barking this whole time, and if he
yeah.
messes up my
Absolutely.
Christmas packages, it's over for him. I'll be right back.
He's probably out there eating them right now. All right, I will go over a couple of these and then fly solo for a minute. Let's see, and then we have Honey in the Rock. Hey, good to see you. Man, I wish I was better at this. I remember when new people are doing this, and I'm like, "Is it really that hard?" And it's not that hard. It's just a lot to be getting used to. We do have some questions, which I want to basically wait for Liz to get back here because I really do think that she is an authority on some of it, but I will pull up Children of Scientology. What they ran on us kids' spirit of play line was such a manipulation not to take our abusive situation seriously. Life is a game. Don't you want a bigger game? Also, it's a recruiting technique. That is very, very true. The whole, if you have interests in life, hey, she's back.
The packages were right on the doorstep, so that brave driver and delivery person walked all the way to my door. So,
Wow. Awesome. Good. The stuff's there. It hasn't been eaten.
right.
Um, so we had this from Children of Scientology, what they ran on us kids. Spirit of play line was such a manipulation not to take our abusive situation seriously. Life is a game. Don't you want a bigger game? Also a recruiting technique. Very true. Like, especially for not only invalidating a person's interests and innate abilities, because I've kind of come as I've seen my kids, each one of them I can start to pinpoint like the interests that they have and trying to then provide them opportunities to like learning opportunities like extracurriculars and things do they really
Mhm.
like one is completely into space and she wants to be in aerospace, the other one is into gymnastics, and the other one probably wants to do something in the arts. So you see that in your children, like I try to like give them opportunities in order to find out, is this something you really want to do? Try to nurture these things. But the don't you want a bigger game line that we're always run, that is, I think, so destructive to the person's innate interests. And you just squash it down. It's like you're going to work for this organization. And that's how it felt all the time.
Ugh, it's awful. I know, it's awful. It makes me think too about the early days of Scientology when L. Ron Hubbard was first forming his Commodore's Messengers
Hmm.
service, I think they're called, or organization with the young children. It's another thing I don't understand, I suppose you could say, the mindset of someone who wants to get their mental clutches into a bunch of young people and conform them into do your bidding. And that initial desire that L. Ron Hubbard clearly had, because he had what, a dozen Commodore messengers, all mostly all young girls,
Hmm.
and they did everything for him. They did his clothes, made his meals, caught the ash from his cigarette, massaged his back, helped him put his pants on.
It's like kind of creepy.
It's
Uh,
very creepy. And then that sort of attitude toward children trickled down through, and eventually you have someone like my parents or the Delphi curriculum makers, and they're using that as reference. They're
so
using what that guy said as
yeah, yeah.
reference.
Do you think some of like the like, because obviously he was on the ship and he had kind of these young girls that would wait on him hand and foot. I think that there was definitely a level of manipulation that was occurring there and taking advantage of them just for his own personal gain. Though my understanding of it wasn't ever really there wasn't a sexual component of it. Although I do think it's a little bit odd and like some of the clothes that they would wear are, at best, were inappropriate. But that whole
I
like kind
agree.
of, yeah, like they were being groomed to be like servants for him at a,
Yes.
at his beck and call 24/7, 365, like helping him get comfortable in bed and sleep. Like,
Yes, and mirroring his emotions. If he was angry and he
mhm,
sent a message through his messenger down to whatever, the boiler room, and he was yelling, that messenger, that 12-year-old girl, whatever, would have to then yell and take on that same emotion. So
mhm,
there's like a further, I think, manipulation. But I agree. I have not heard stories of like assaults in or really any type of creepy that kind of behavior.
yeah,
But I also remember early on in his affirmations, I don't know if you know anything about his affirmations book that was came out with Jerry Armstrong's
mm-mm.
stuff. Anyway, there's a good chance that L. Ron Hubbard was impotent by that time of his life.
I've heard stuff about that.
So, which is fine. No, that's fine, but that would also explain the just
Pre-Viagra,
the
right?
lack of action in that way. So,
Yeah.
not to get all up in his private business, but once you got a harem, I don't want to call him harem because that actually has a connotation and a definition, but you have a cult, a cult
Yeah.
of young children doing your bidding. Um, and I think it's also really interesting that your parents or my parents looked at this man and said, "Yep, that's the guy."
Well,
That's the guy that knows what he's talking about.
right. My parents were such a dichotomy and a mix between the two of their personalities. My father, very much a narcissist that almost fell in love with Hubbard in terms of he
Mhm.
saw him as someone he related to on a personal level. And
Right.
he read his stuff and it just like resonated with him. He has the
Mhm.
same kind of grandiose personality, disorder stuff that I think Hubbard probably had.
Right.
But then my mother is very much, she's a more subservient type of person and was more of a follower, not a leader. So our family dynamic before my father got us into Scientology felt like a cult. Like
Right.
everything he said what goes. Anything else was not important. We all were kind of on pins and needles around him all the time, and that's just the way that he ruled with an iron fist, and what he said was like the way that everyone had to follow. And then got involved in Scientology and it felt similar, but it was just more structured, and he doubled down on it very much. But then what was, the bold enough kind of person to think he could take it and kind of do his own swirling with it and things of this nature, like altering it himself. But um it, for him, it felt right. And that's what was, like, I don't know that my mother would have ever gotten involved. Well, I hazard to say that because I think it's easy for people to get involved in cults and not realize it until they're already invested in it, and then it's very hard to get away from.
Yep.
But I don't
That
think she would have been seeking it out the same way he was.
right. He probably led her into that. And that's the thing that's interesting because it is usually one person gets in
Mhm.
and sells it and gets, it has that ripple effect. Mine was my grandma. And then you've got these different generations just end up getting sucked into it. To be
Absolutely.
careful. And that's another thing about raising children. So you were talking earlier about how you have to produce just to exist, right? You have to have your exchange in, right?
Yeah.
So in Scientology, there's this idea that the best thing for the child is to let them hold their weight. And sometimes, to work hard to, I don't know, how can we explain this? To
You
like
have
exist,
to you have
earn the
to
right to
like, I
exist.
think it has to do with the exchange levels in Scientology. Like, for a person to exist and not be criminal, they need to have fair
Right.
exchange.
That's
So
the thing.
there's
Not be
the
criminal.
various exchange levels in Scientology. There's basically
Right.
like theft or no exchange, and then there's partial exchange, which is really, oh, I'm doing the little hey. And there's all these
Did
different
you do that?
levels. I think it might be a new app thing. Like I can do like boom.
Ooh, that's
Anyway,
very, very cool.
yeah.
A serious topic with hilarious graphics.
Then I do a little thumb, and then I think it pops up. Boop. Anyway,
Oh,
so but then like fair exchange would be like the normal level of exchange that businesses have, and then there's exchange in abundance, which is when you are producing above and beyond what was asked for. So, and Hubbard always says you should strive for exchange in abundance. Meanwhile,
right.
he's like harvesting money from people for his bullshit things that he's selling. Um, So it's like, okay. So as children, it was the concept was if you don't exchange, you
Hmm.
will become criminal. So if we are there and you're not working for your room and board and kind of contributing to the movement, you're
Hmm.
going to become a criminal. And if you become a criminal, you are part of the problem. So you have to work in order to not be a criminal, which is such a weird contrasting idea from like, I want my children to do chores around the house. We do things together as a family. Like, it's a
That's what I wanted to ask you about. How do you
yeah.
do that now with chores? How do you parent now? I'm curious. Keep going. I didn't mean to cut you off.
So
I'm
the way
dying.
we do it is we do it on an incentive basis, like, and I'm not saying it's working great, but it's like, hey, we want to get you to be interested in doing something. Like, hey, I want a thing. Like, let's say that I have one child that she already has plenty of stuffed animals, and by when I say plenty, like they're like over 100 stuffed animals. But if she wants a stuffed animal, like, okay, I'd like you to do something to earn that. And she's like 8. So when she does something like the things that we want her to do, like, I bussing her plate and going and putting it in the sink, helping with some dishes, picking up after herself, doing something that she's told, cleaning up after, like whatever tasks we give her, she earns a little plastic coin. And once she gets a certain amount of those things, she earns like an allowance. So
Mhm.
her, but that's not contingent. Like, it's not like, hey, if you don't do this, we're not going to feed you. Like, that's not part of the conversation. Like, you're not.
Right.
So we don't tell her she's criminal if she does it. We say, you need to, like, hey, if you're not doing this, then mom and dad have to do it. And mom and dad would like to get done with this so that we could put you to bed and relax and have a glass of wine and go chill out for a minute before we go to sleep. And just have a little bit of time for ourselves. So we
Yeah.
try to just include them into the conversation. And if they're not doing it, and this is an interesting answer, or a question that we got in here, which I kind of want to highlight. Um, Question: have you ever caught yourself going back into Scientology teachings when dealing with your kids? The main way that I was dealt with when I was a kid, if I wasn't doing something, is to get screamed at.
Mm.
So yelling was a major component of what would be happening there. And I, at first, would feel like my response when something wasn't happening would be to default to what my childhood was. And my
Mhm.
wife would be like, that's not actually fixing anything, because all that happens is the kid then doubles down on it. And you're in this like little thing,
Power struggle.
power struggle, as opposed to if the kid's not doing something and you try to connect, like, hey, we're trying to do something. Hey, what's going on? Okay. Hey, understanding what's going on in their emotions, because they're responding and reacting to something, trying to use their behavior as a window to see what they're reacting to and use that as an opportunity for connection. Like, hey, I really get it that you really want to go and play right now. And I want you to do that too. But let's pick up after ourselves so we don't have to do it when we come back. Let's get that done. And then we can go and do that other thing. And they'll be like, oh, okay. And then they'll want to go do that. That was never an option when we were a kid. Like, it was,
Right.
you're in trouble. It's a humiliation thing. There's a lot of peer pressure in the groups that I was in the cadet organizations. And
Mhm.
the parenting also was never being done by parents. It was being done by the staff members that were assigned to take care of the children, which were
Right.
not
Who
our
were
parents.
stressed out, who probably didn't even have a bond or like connection with each kid and had no idea what they were doing, most likely.
Yeah. And there wasn't a healthy, um, there was never a healthy ratio of teachers or
Right.
adults, is all they would call them, adult Sea Org members to cadets or children. It was always too many kids to properly manage and to be able to have one-on-one time with. It wasn't great. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, that sucks. Hard.
kind of does.
And those are hard things to overcome, especially when they happen when you're really young. It takes a lot of work. And I'm not even totally convinced that our brains can to not gonna speak for you, but I think my brain's fried. I'm
Oh,
doing the best I can, and I will continue to work hard and do the best that I can, but
I
hey.
agree. And like a lot of the way that I'm wired, there's a whole thing of like, hey, do you think you're ever like fully recovered or out of it
Mhm.
or stuff like that? Like when you say your brain's fried, we're wired to think certain ways and
Yeah.
respond in certain. So we can do a lot of work to try to fix the way we react to things, but a lot of that early childhood development and years and years and years of kind of seeing how we were doing stuff and how that was all working, you can't just turn it off. And it's not like we reach this endpoint of like, hey, I'm fixed now, or I've recovered now. This thing's going to keep doing that the more I talk with my hands. Um,
Fine.
I think that it's a process. I do want recovery. I want to have healing. I want, I've looked at opportunities for therapy and counseling. Sometimes that's a little hard with my job profession because it's not always an available thing that I can do. But luckily, I have a great spouse, and that's why I try to read books and work on it as much as we can. But I think it's a process and a road, and I'm sure I'll have it a lot better figured out when I'm a lot older than I am now. But I feel like every day is an opportunity to do something a little different. So we'll see.
Definitely is. It definitely is. And I noticed for myself that, I mean, when I first got out, or I was first going through my initial faith crisis to now, I have so many more tools in my tool belt so
Mhm.
that if I do feel myself getting a little triggered, have I know what to do. I'm not saying that I perfectly apply it all the time, but
Yeah.
there is a long way to come. And yeah, so I guess I don't want to say I'm like it's hopeless. It's certainly not hopeless, but it
No.
is an interesting debate to see if somebody, I don't know, just how it affects somebody in the long run. I would strongly encourage anybody who's thinking about raising their children in Scientology to not do it.
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
across the board, just don't do it.
Yeah.
Um, so I wonder, sometimes what it would be like if I hadn't, but
I wonder
that's a
that too.
dangerous
There's a lot
game.
of what ifs, but there's no
Yeah,
really
that's the
never
first one.
there's never a good solution to the what if question. It's kind
Right.
of the spiral.
It
Like
is.
if I what ifed, then I wouldn't want to give up any of the things that I have today. So
Right.
I'm happy with where I'm at,
Yep.
but I'm not happy with the road I had to take to get here. Um,
Yeah, exactly. It is nice to be looking back on some of the hardest parts of getting out. That's for sure.
yeah.
So I
And
definitely have empathy for people who are still working through a lot of that nitty gritty. It's a challenge.
I know for me it
Um,
took years.
yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that's one of the biggest differences for me that I am so conscious about when raising my kids and just dealing with other humans in general is in Scientology, when I would mess up or something would happen or I would get sick or get hurt, I got the message that I was bad.
Hmm.
Me as a spirit, me beyond my body, like the creation, the soul, the essence that is me was bad. And in conscious discipline or these other ways of thinking with kids, it's the behavior is quote bad. The
Right.
choice was, quote, bad. You are not bad. And so I think that when it comes to that very simple differentiation, so much of Scientology can be avoided. Because if you just never go down a path where you're telling a child they are bad, I think is a good, safe line for me,
Right.
if that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Yeah. Some words have a lot of power. And, that whole thing of like good inside, that's why I'm kind of like reading that book. Also, a book that I loved is Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. It's a long title, but it's very relevant. Listening to that, I'm like, what? I'm
I've
like,
flipped through that one before.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little bit like clinical studies on like
Mhm.
anyway. Yeah, that was a good time. Oh, here's an interesting question for you, Liz. Question, Liz, did you obtain your degree before having your children, or did having them feed your passion?
A little bit of both. So after Delphi at 14, I left and I ended up getting sort of a fake degree, a fake diploma at 14 from the Larry Dennison Academy, and I started community college. So I got my associate's degree in that beginning time, and I did not have children.
When you
Did
were
not have any
14?
kids. Well, I graduated with my associates when I was 19. So from 15 to 19, it took me a while. I had no idea what I was doing. I was entering community college, which was like in a completely new world for me.
And also
I made
super
a lot of
young too.
mistakes. Yeah, I was really young. I moved into the dorms at community college when I was 15, which also exposed me to a whole other situation.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, so yes, I got my associates in early childhood education, 2-year degree, and then I went to work, and then I had my kid, and right around that time, I finished getting my bachelor's degree. That was such a long-winded answer. Anyway, half and half. Yes, kids, and no kids.
That's a good answer, though.
It took
All
me
right.
forever. It took me 8 years to get a 4-year degree.
So
So,
I'm about halfway to getting my degree, but it has nothing to do with raising children. It has to do with raising little helicopter pilots.
uh,
Um,
much more
but
lucrative degree. I promise you that.
as long as I guess you're flying, it does. Here's one question: did either of you do any of the OT levels?
I did not. I actually didn't get that high in Scientology. I was caught in a loop of ethics, life repair, TRs. So no, I didn't. Did you?
I did not get up to the OT levels. I did do quite a bit of auditing, a lot of sec checking, their interrogation process. And then I was getting some Dynetics, upper level Dynetics auditing to get me to go to the state of clear. And I think I was in the middle of another process, and I was giving them this clear cognition. Like, hey, I think
Oh,
I thought up this whole reactive mind thing myself. And I never got it really handled or taken care of. And then I ended up blowing. So that's
it's funny
just,
you say that because I also cognited. Well, I cognited. I was past life clear, and I didn't never get taken seriously, but it was always used as the reason that I was out int. I got told I was out int a lot. So out int, it's so bizarre to be told, especially like as a developing teen for me, that your spirit is like either trapped in your body or trapped out of your body.
mhm.
And it's like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, you're moody, bitchy teenager. What's wrong with you? Oh, your spirit. You must be out in. And then going through all these like introspective, like objectives, just, oh my God. Do
Yeah.
you remember the
I
objective?
got I get the objective processing, which is the whole book and bottle thing where like walk over there, pick it up. What is its
Yes.
color? What is its shape? What is its weight? Okay, put it back down, walk across the
Yes.
table, pick up a book. And you do this
Hundreds of
over and over
hours.
again. And like
Yes.
to me, I didn't get the point. I'm like, this is ridiculous. It's supposed to get a person to interact with their like environment, I guess if they're a huge druggie or something. It never made any sense to me. But I had the same thing being done with me when I wanted to leave, and several times was this interiorization rundown, which the
Mm,
whole concept is if you've gone out of your body, like I'm a spirit, I've gone out of my body, and then
right.
when you come back in, they say it's traumatic for a spirit to come back in the body, like it
Right.
creates an impact, it creates a point of almost like a point of pain for that spirit, and then they
Right.
they start to address earlier times you went when you couldn't get out of something or where you were stuck or you
Yeah.
wanted to go in. So the whole process itself, it's asking you questions that are very strange,
Mm-hmm.
but it constantly makes you start to either come up with like these things of being outside of your body, like these
Mm-hmm.
fake uh, remembrances, or you immediately
Right.
go into dreaming up past life stuff. That's
Yep.
what happened with
That's,
me. Like you didn't have an answer to the question. They'd sit there and ask you and ask you and
yeah.
ask you. And it's super strange. And then you've already kind of been indoctrinated, like the past lives are
Mhm.
real, whatever you're looking at. And they guide you with that e-meter. Like, what are you thinking of? And you're like, I'm thinking of like I don't know. Then you just, oh, what's that? What's that? What's that? And then they go after it. But the
Yep.
questions, and I was getting this as I was trying to leave the Sea organization as a child when I
Mhm.
was 15. I was trying to leave. They say you're out interiorization process, out int. So you have to get this thing. And the questions were like, go in, went in, pushed in, pulled in, want to go in, can't get in,
Right.
can't go in, kicked out of spaces, being trapped. Like I've
That's
had the shit so
right.
many times. So it's like recall a time where you were being trapped. And I'm like, I'm trying to
Yeah.
fucking leave. Like
Trapped right
right
now.
now. They're like, okay, can you remember an earlier similar time that you were being
Right.
trapped? I'm like, well, how about the last session we had to? But
Right.
you do this, and it's like you have to get through this before you can get on to the other thing. And
Right.
it's this weird, like self-licking ice cream cone of insanity. And this is the
Self.
kind of introspective
Mhm.
crap as kids that we were having to deal with.
Yeah.
Um, I would never ask my child a question like that, ever.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. It's very
sorry,
bizarre
got worked up.
and so prescribed, like prescriptive, done in almost like a pseudo clinical setting.
Hmm.
And I don't know, the repetition of it. I know some people who definitely disassociated for the first time on their objectives. There was a course, as you know, maybe people watching don't know, there is a course called TRs and Objectives. So once you get through like your first communication courses as a little kid, it's sort of one of the meatier. You get into the lower TRs where you sit and acknowledge and talk, basically, and be, up into the upper indocs where you're leading someone around, you're having them engage with the physical environment. From what I understand today, it is totally to teach people how to control other people and how to be controlled, because you got to do it with a twin, right? So if Mike and I were doing this, I would be the person leading him around, telling him to touch the wall, pick up the bottle, and you would be pretending at some point not to want to do it. You'd become difficult. You would be pressing, like drilling me on how to control you.
Yeah.
And then we would switch and
Mhm.
you would be doing that to me. And I'd be like, no, get away from you. And be like, I'll repeat the command, walk to the wall, touch the wall.
But then
So
if
I
you
find
don't
that,
do it, I'm gonna force you to. I'm gonna actually grab you, and you
yeah,
could be trying to get away from me, and I'm going to restrain you and
yes,
put you over to that wall.
yes,
And so we were indoctrinated that I should
that's
be able to
normal.
physically put hands on someone and make them do something, and it's okay for them to do that to me.
And it's okay for them to do it to me. See, that's the sneaky underside that I didn't realize was happening while it was happening. I knew that
Yeah.
I was being taught to body route, to get this person's body like to do this thing. But I didn't really understand at the same time that I was being indoctrinated to be controlled.
Right.
That really blew my mind later on. And now when I look back on some of these early training routines, yeah, it's really just teaching a person to check out of who they are and
Mhm.
and fulfill this other role, this robotic role. And that's really dangerous for children, in my
S
opinion.
And make you suggestible, and it makes
Yes,
you compliant. And
exactly.
and I think that the whole part of the upper indoctrination, like, when you getting you to do that to another person, for me, was the biggest thing that made it okay for somebody to do it to me. Because if
Yes.
I was doing it to you, you should
Mhm.
be able to do it to me. Like, that was the thing
Right.
more than receiving it that made me receive it,
Yeah.
was to do it. I don't.
Such a mind game. It's
Yeah.
so interesting and bizarre. Well, and then, you take it, let's say one step further where you end up, not you, but somebody in a position of authority ends up abusing that authority
Mhm.
and, maybe going too far in that regard. It's like, where are the checks and balances? Because the system is already designed to make that okay. So, you can have these situations where you're just escalating violence. Really, people will get violent and scream and get up in your face. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you experienced that on staff, or I didn't get that at Delphi, but on staff and
Well, I
some
worked
other
for David
situations.
Miscavige for a little while, so,
So,
yeah,
firsthand.
I
Yeah,
saw it, yeah.
exactly. Well, and that's the other thing, right? If David Miscavige can get so furiously irate that his face is, he's spitting and he's got his vein popping out, he's the leader, then that's how you handle people. You're
Mhm.
looking up to someone. That's what you do. That's the correct response,
Right.
which is not effective leadership.
No, I think that that guy has squandered everything that he's had, not to get too far out the reservation, because it's so easy to, like, talk talk about this guy and have very negative things to say, but talk about a workforce that is just there to do anything he could possibly want them to do at any
Right.
time, and he just wasted that by just verbal abuse constantly. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it was a lot, but what I saw was, up at International Management. So this is a pristinely gorgeous property.
Mhm.
All in all, the food was, in comparison to Sea Org food that I've had, it wasn't bad. There were times when it was bad and we were forced to just eat rice and beans, but it was sort of this little utopia of the way things were supposed to be. And then we as children were off on this little ranch which was separate from it, and we were supposed to be being indoctrinated and raised to then go and be upper level managers or
Mhm.
assistants at this international headquarters. So there was, the only path for us was to go from that ranch and to end up working at Golden Era Productions or the international management units,
Mhm.
or Religious Technology Center. That was the only path. You couldn't take another path. So if you had another
Mhm.
interest, like, I'll just use Laura for example, because she's, a very, she's a very stark example. obviously a very high energy, creative individual that loves music and is very unique.
Mhm.
She was like that as a kid. There is not room for uniqueness and
Nope.
for like, they could have taken like, hey, this kid loves to sing. We could probably like, get her into music. She could
Mhm.
learn, get into the arts, like have a process where she could go into something that she wanted to do. But the only
Right.
process for any of us was to fall into this little mold so that you then shoot out the other side as a beneficial cog in this machine. And that was the
Right.
only way that kids were dealt with. And we were being raised by people that really had no business raising us. But then we to go work on this other property, this utopian looking property, gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. But it was miserable to work there. I
Mhm.
have nightmares still about being there. When I have a bad dream, it's about either someone that I care about being stuck there or I'm stuck
Mhm.
there back in that situation. And it made me realize once I was gone, I'm like, if Scientology became exactly what it's supposed to be, and it was fully in line with what L. Ron Hubbard said. Now, David Miscavige probably makes everything a little bit worse than it otherwise needs to be, but that is more or less what the result is. Like
Mhm.
this complete and total control of the people and exactly what
Mhm.
you want. It's the book 1984.
Yeah.
Orwell's imagination of that is pretty much what Hubbard envisioned and tried to find a way to create policy to create that whole vision in my mind.
Oh, I agree, I agree, and I think once you realize the power of getting, people in younger and younger,
Mhm.
I think he started to really prey on, putting that effort into the younger person so that he could just completely indoctrinate and dominate them. It's like that saying, with complete power brings complete corruption. I know I
Yeah.
got that wrong,
Um,
but you know what I mean.
ultimate. Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah.
more power, the more corrupt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's escaping me right now too, but it's only because I'm staring at this camera and squirrel. Anyway. Um,
You're fine. Yeah, it's the uniqueness is seen. It's so weird, right? Because there's also this thing in Scientology about creativity and art and how it's like the highest form.
mhm.
But it's only for like a select few. There's a very strict, is it caste system? Is that the right word? Like
Yeah.
levels of what as a kid you can access. So Grant Cardone's daughter, I'm sure, has a lot of things at her fingertips, and she might have a lot of other opportunities that the other side of that, the cadet org, it's like you get nothing. So, so much of it is how Scientology is applied, in my opinion, because
Mhm.
I know some people who manage to not apply all of it. I know some people who never even got security checked. But I think it's the intention of the adults around him. If the intention of the adults around you is to control you, then you get the max.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that.
That was a long spiel.
I think it can be weaponized, and a lot of times it is. It turns into
It
a way
is.
to control people because it's an effective way to control people, but it results in broken people.
It definitely, that is another thing. Their foresight in Scientology is very poor,
Mhm.
in my opinion. Scientology, I mean, L. Ron Hubbard, for all the things he saw coming in trillions of years, he never saw the internet. He never saw how fast information would get spread. He
Mhm.
never thought anybody would find out his lies, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then, even with the David Miscavige situation, it's like, did he not realize that we would grow up, that the children that he screwed over would grow up and become adults that would now be able to look back and tell the world what happened?
Right.
Where was that thought process? What did he did? Was it actually the statistic was 100% of us were going to be Scientologists? That's what they thought? It's
It,
foolish.
yeah, I mean, even in something that has a very positive outcome, you wouldn't have an attrition rate like we do. Like the attrition rate on not
Yeah.
only Scientologists, but as for especially like children that grew up in Scientology is
Yes.
massive because
Massive.
none of us came up with this like we wanted this crazy for ourselves. And when we somehow finally realized like, wait, what is this? And then trying to come out of it, now you're trying to um in like re-indoctrinate yourself into what the world looks like and trying to make up for lost time. And I
Right.
left one cult and went and joined the other one because I went and joined the military,
Yeah.
which looking back, sometimes I almost feel like it was the easy button for me because I was so used to a certain kind of lifestyle
Mhm.
that it was easy to do. Like there was a lot more physically demanding things that I did and a lot more that it has actually been worthwhile for me. But in terms of like dealing with emotion and the regulation and the structure and all that sort of thing, I came from something much worse. So it
Right.
was quite easy to be successful at it.
It's a
But
soft
anyway,
landing for you then.
it was, although I've made
Yeah.
some hard landings in the process of doing so,
Yeah.
literally and figuratively. Um,
I think we all have.
uh,
Yeah, well, and it also makes me wonder too. I'm always curious as to why people make the choice to get out. Like, what's that final straw? And people always are asking me that as well. Um, I know for me, having kids,
mhm,
having a child, and seeing my baby boy turn 8, knowing that that is when Scientology he's supposed to get sec checked. What? That's
yeah,
insane to me. There's so many things I was like, "That's not happening to my kid. That's not happening to my kid." And that gave me, I think, the courage to so I'm always curious, why how other people get there. Even other people who don't have kids. I'm like, "How'd you figure it out? How'd you
right,
do it?"
yeah,
Because it took me a long time. It took me looking at basically a reincarnate, not literally, but like genetically so similar to my older brother and having this little boy because he didn't make it out, my older brother. Like he
right,
unalived himself and I'm not trying to say that raising my son is the same as raising my brother. That's not at all where I'm going with this, but just being entrusted with with a boy, with a human child,
right,
being like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that.
yeah.
I know that.
And the reflection of having the children, like when they've hit these kind of age milestones, where then I reflect back on what I was doing
Right.
at the time, that's been the thing that's been so um, maddening for me. And then like that's where the kind of it all starts to fall apart, and the things
Mhm.
I'm able to start processing the reality of the situation. And I think, people that don't have their own children, I don't know how they're able to process it that same way. I'm not going to say they're not processing it because I have no idea what they're doing, but I know for me, I wasn't able to process certain things about my own childhood until I
Right.
had kids. And now that I do, I'm like, what?
Well,
It's
that's been my
yeah,
experience too. Obviously there are other experiences out there, but yeah, it's definitely something I tend to get curious about. So,
yeah.
yeah.
All right. We have one thing question. If you're comfortable to do so, can you tell us how many kids and how old they are? I have three. They're all girls. I have one that's in middle school and then two that are in elementary. Kind of keep it a little bit vague, but I'm an outnumbered dad of a lot of females.
Sounds like it. I am the exact opposite. I have 2 boys and I am outnumbered by males. Even my 2 dogs are boys. So I'm the only female. Well, we have a cat, but she has to stay outside. So, oops. Um, and they are one's a senior and one's a fourth grader. So, especially in the older years, like I moved out. I graduated high school at 14, moved out to community college at 15. Then I had my own apartment. I was monetarily helped, but I didn't live with my parents. Um, it's crazy to think of my kid doing that. Like it's insane. I mean, he
Yeah.
could do it, but
Well,
why would that be best for him?
I don't know that it would because,
I don't think it
I think that I've made, so we have this a saying in aviation. There's old pilots, there's bold pilots, but there's no old bold pilots.
Ah,
Which is like, hey, if you're going to do dumb stuff, you're going to die, which is
right.
kind of what it says. So I think taking that analogy and applying it to parenthood, like we've made a lot of mistakes. I think that one of our main jobs is to take the mistakes that we've had and try to synthesize those into life lessons that we might be able to share,
Right.
because you can't make every mistake that was made before you and be successful. Like they shouldn't have to relive my mistakes without me at least doing the due diligence of explaining things to them when it's age appropriate on the mistakes that I made and
Mhm.
the things that I went through so that they can get some value added from it. So that's what I try to get
Yeah.
out of my childhood.
Yeah, and that's good. That makes a lot of sense to me. And it makes me think about the natural consequences versus like fabricated consequences
Mhm.
because when I'm parenting, I'm explaining to my kid like you're going to need to bring your coat because it's cold outside because this is what happens to your body and then, whatever if he's like I'm not bringing my coat and it's that age appropriate time he doesn't bring his coat, he gets cold. And then he says, "Oh, okay, I'll bring my coat next time." So as
Yeah.
a parent, it's a great way for me to make sure that I've structured a safe environment for those natural consequences, but then I can kind of let that happen.
Mhm.
Whereas in Scientology, I feel like it's all fabricated. It's like, oh, you're going to be a criminal or you're going to, get sick in the future or, you've got to write up your W's or do lower conditions. It just,
Or when you get sick, it's because you have a suppressive person that's impacting you.
yeah, it's
Like
like
shit like
nothing
this.
really
It's all
matches
like
up that you can see.
these fake intangibles that are almost like, this
Yes.
it's and Hubbard always talks a lot of crap about like early witch doctors and like people that spiritually didn't know what they were doing. Meanwhile, a lot of his stuff is like this
Yeah.
weird bullshit supernatural stuff that has no basis in science. I'm like,
Quackery.
there is so much, yeah, quackery.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. Um,
Yeah,
let's see. Keep
for
pulling up a
sure.
couple of these questions. I think they're at least helping kind of move the conversation along too. I
Yeah,
kind of
it's
enjoy
great.
it. Us from Private Tom First Class question: would you say that early child development provides you the structure or the way you process information and think? I would say that it very much does. And for a lot of the problems that I've had to re try to re-indoctrinate myself in terms of how to think and how to structure my reactions to certain things based off of the way that I was raised.
Yeah, for sure. Everything I've learned about early childhood development, like 0 to 5, is the human is so remarkable. That little baby who can't even hold their own head up to within 5 short years from, full sentences, imaginary games. They have an idea of the world around them, but they also have already formed a huge idea of who they are because
Mhm.
everything that's been mirrored back to them. And so, yes, I would agree that the way that we think, and maybe more importantly, what we think of ourselves is often established in those first 5 years. And so for me, I was like such a passionate thing. I was so passionate. I guess I still am, but during the time when I was studying it, so much more passionate because it was so new to me. That was so new to me. I came out at the opposite side. I was in Scientology raised that you already have everything you need. You just have to let your body catch up, which is like so opposite. It's like, okay, you're
So
starting from
untrue. Yeah,
scratch. You have to pour into this person. You have to be there for them, explain things to them, take care of their physical needs. Like, and then you get a human. And if you don't do that, it's way harder, way harder,
absolutely.
way
Yeah,
harder.
as the environment is shaping them based off of whatever they're having to react to. Yeah, it gets dangerous. Which I think kind of this is actually kind of a good lead-in comment to that. From Peace of My Mind, where the children of Church Scientology emotionally unattached their parents and vice versa. Um, for me, I was always a mama's boy from like because I had this father that was ultra controlling and a narcissist. So I was very attached to my mother. She was my preferred parent from day one. And the only one I felt safe with. So then when we went to the Sea organization, I had less access to her, but always an emotional connection, even when we were geographically separated.
Mm,
Um, but it got to the point of the organization raising me, and because she was then working for the organization full time.
right.
So I had an emotional connection, but I saw a lot of other kids around me that they put on a good show when their parents were around because that's what they were told to do. And but they were being raised by the organization. They weren't being raised by their parents. If there was discipline that had to be doled out, it was being doled out by the organization. And their
Right.
parents were like working and they could help their parents by not being a problem for their parents.
Right.
But there was no parenting going on. It was being you're being raised by this machine. And
Hmm.
that's how it felt.
Yeah. I think I saw a lot of that um, at boarding school. I mean, you've got children who are away from their parents for pretty long periods of time. And we had certain times of night, that we could call home or whatever. But once in my opinion, you remove a child from a home, there's like a fracture that happens. There's some sort of, I don't know, once you have to start looking out for yourself in that way, it just changes you a little bit. Y I don't know how to explain it.
For me, I became distant. It
Yeah,
felt like I was responsible for myself more than I probably should have been.
exactly, that's it, like, you are responsible for yourself, so there's that switch that happens,
Mhm.
and I don't know how much our parents were responsible for us, different, degrees, but if you go away from them, you don't live with them, it's impossible to feel, I think, that they are on your how do I explain it? I think you explained it so much better than me. I'm
Well, yeah, no,
trying here.
I no, I get what you're saying, but there's being separated physically, is a problem too, because there is a lot that comes just in being able to physically touch another person. So if you
Yes.
can't have like, even if it's just like a hug or, a high five, or just being in close
Mhm,
proximity to another person, like humans are kind of empathic. When you're around another person, if they're in a crappy mood, sometimes that's me, then my
right.
wife has to like say, "Oh, I'm dealing with Mike in a crappy mood today." You pick up the emotional energy of people around you. So if
Mhm.
that's like, you need that nurturing energy from your parents. If
Yeah,
you're not going to get that if you're away from them. Like, that's not something you're going to get
right,
on a phone call the same
right.
way. You'll get an empathetic connection, but you're not going to get that physical, you know presence with one another, and there's a lot of nurturing that comes with that. So
Yeah.
that was robbed of us in a lot of cases, and I think that
Mhm,
that was damaging. And I think
mm,
that I think it's important for both boys and girls, but being now a father of girls, I can, and then kind of reflecting back on some of the other girls that I grew up with that are now grown women who have their own families. I think it not having a family dynamic, I think for girls is very, very damaging. Um, and I can see where that would be damaging for boys as well, but especially like as you're going through puberty and like all of this
mhm.
sort of stuff, like they're not there to like solve these problems with you. It's like I shaved for the first time by myself, and then the next day I went back to try to shave again. I'm like, it feels different. I'm like, you don't need to shave every day, idiot. You're 13 years old. You probably need to shave once a month. Like no one was there to tell you that. Very low key example, but there's a lot more.
That's
But yeah.
funny. I remember when I first started my period and I was at boarding school, TMI story, but I called my mom from at a weird time of day because I had to, like, leave class to whatever, go have my adult give me, like, a pad, and
Hmm.
I called my mom from the payphone. I said, "Mom, guess what?" She goes, "What? You got routed to ethics again?"
Oh
I
God.
said, "No, I started my period." She's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
It did feel like I got routed to ethics. But, it's just weird. Yeah, like, that's the connection that you have, like, with your own maternal person, just a payphone
Hmm.
telling about your experience, and someone else is actually helping you.
Yeah, and where I think where it clicked for me that that was an issue was when I would go on a combat deployment, which is something that most people don't do, which I think
Mm,
that that's a good thing. But when you go on a deployment, like in the military, people don't touch each other. Like you
mhm.
salute, like there isn't, you don't shake hands in the military.
Okay.
So when you're deployed, the only time you engage in physical contact with another human is usually when it's violent.
Right.
Um, or you
Interesting.
just don't touch someone, which is usually the way that it goes. So you go for a year straight where you're geographically separated, but you don't physically touch other people,
Hmm.
because you're covered up with uniform all the time. You're not around your spouse or significant other or
Yeah.
your children. You just call on the phone, and then when you get home, like the sensation of touching another human is so, like, you're like, oh my, like what? It just
Yeah.
feels like this. You feel like something's been missing. You don't know what it is, and then when you finally realize it, you're like, oh wow, that was
Oh,
serious. And I
that's
realized, wait, we dealt with that a lot as kids. Like we would be gone from our parents. And then as now that I'm kind of reflecting back on that, I get home, I'm touching my children. I'm like, they didn't get a chance to see me or touch me for a year, but they have
yeah.
my wife there with me. and Emily was taking care of them and doing all this. I'm like, I'm glad they had that, but then they have to get used to me again.
Mhm.
And it was just like, I've noticed like just the physical interaction is very, very important for children
Yeah.
with their parents. And if you have that broken for a long period of time, you have to ease back into it in order
Mm.
for everyone to feel normal with each other again.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. That's interesting.
Anyway, I've had some, I guess, weird reflections based off of weird situations that I've been in.
It's great.
Anyway,
It's good. It's how we get through it.
yeah, right. Mike, question, Mike, you had a great military career. Do you think you did so well was because of your time in the Church of Scientology as a youth? I'm going to say no. I think that I did say that this was an easy transition for me, but me staying in the military was really something I wanted to do from a young age, and I wanted to do that when I was a kid and wasn't allowed to. So me transitioning back into the military was kind of me following my life's dream and doing those things, and the time that I've then
Right.
spent in it has been just repetition in order to kind of stay with it. Some people go in the military, it's a short period of time. It's definitely not for everybody. But I've also seen former Scientologists go in and not be I haven't seen it, but I know of some that have gone in and not been successful doing it.
Mm.
I do think it made me a hard worker, and to that degree, I've been successful.
Mhm.
But I intend to work myself at a rate that is almost self-destructive. Like I will
Unsustainable.
unsustainable, and I will work myself to the bone, and I
Mhm.
will look great with respect to some of my peers, but then it's not healthy for me. It's not
Right.
healthy for me emotionally, physically, and it's something that I need to regulate. But I'm
Mhm.
almost inclined to I need to finish, 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 do, do, do in order to feel like I've accomplished something and I can relax. And that's
Right.
probably not healthy. But I
I
guess it
I
makes
have
me to that degree. So yes and no might be the answer to that question.
Yeah, well, yes and no is always the answer to most questions. But no, I agree, and there is something about, like, being industrious, right? That was part of one of the way to precepts in the way to happiness, like, being
Mm,
industrious, and then also having everything be, like, quantified statistically and have, like, your worth based on these, like, numbers and graphs and charts. It, it's hard to shake that. It's hard to know when to turn that off. I have a hard time with that as well.
yeah, that's absolutely true. No, very, very, very true. Well, I think I've caught up on most of the questions.
It's
Let's
been a good
see.
conversation.
Yeah, it has been a good conversation. I mean, we've done a little over an hour.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed doing it because I'm glad that you reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we should do something together." I absolutely loved talking to you about it, but I like getting because my wife, she's never been in Scientology, and
right.
I love that. Um,
Mhm.
was your husband ever?
Nope, he was not. And I definitely think it would I think about sometimes, man, how crazy that would be to be married to another person who had my same history.
Well, she like
We'd be a mess.
right. Well, I think everyone's a bit of a mess.
I know, I'm a mess.
But we're messy in different ways. That's what's
Yeah,
great about the fact that like her upbringing and my upbringing, they're very different. She has
right,
her things which are very different from my issues, but
right.
we kind of help cancel each other out. And I can't imagine if I was in a relationship with somebody with the same trauma, um, how that would feel. I very
Yeah,
much like the fact that we can just sort of like kind of shovel it away it helps
mhm,
compartmentalize a little bit and to
mhm.
kind of ease back into the society, so to speak. But that's how it
Society,
kind of
yeah,
feels. Yeah,
yeah.
we can
I
we can impose a little bit more. The imposter syndrome isn't as strong when we have somebody to lean on, I guess, right?
That's true, that's true. And, I'm so grateful too for my husband's family because they're all still fairly local. I mean, we hang out with his grandparents. My kids have a good relationship with their great-grandparents on his side. Um, it's taught me so much because 'cause I've never been around a family like really like that before. That's all
Yeah,
intact and shows up to each other and I don't know, it's been really interesting. So I love having I don't know, somebody else something different in the
yeah.
relationship
No, I have
coming
the same
from
thing, and I actually, Emily's family, they're the same way.
okay.
My in-laws, they were just here. They left today. They came into town because kids were having parties and birthdays and
Mhm.
Christmas celebrations and all this singing
Yeah.
and dancing and everything that happens this time of year. So they came into town for it because they're retired, and then just like, stayed for a few days, and then we'll go and visit them. And, we were go out on date night. Don't tell her that I said this, but my mother-in-law is actually super cool. Um, yeah. And yeah, I can cut up and we sit there and poke fun at each other, but it's like, this person's great.
Yeah.
But they're there. And my mother, she would be there now that she's out, but she just physically is not able to do that much. So most of the time we're going to her, kind of bringing her over and enjoying what time we can. I
Mhm.
know she would be the kind of same nurturing person. I almost wonder what my life would be like if she would have not been with my father and kind of just gotten with a better person, and
Right.
how life would have been in a normal kind of family, which that's one thing I wish she would have had, never did.
Right. I know. I could see wanting that for her for sure, especially because it seems so easy looking back. Like, that's the problem. Like, that's the one thing you could
Yeah.
change. Ugh.
It's almost like if you could pinpoint, like if I could fix one thing way back when, but then it would
Yeah.
change everything that I have now. So I don't want to do that.
No,
Play
I
that whole
get it.
Back
I
to the
get
Future
it.
game.
I get it. Yeah, the Back to the Future. I was thinking Terminator, but same
Yeah, same thing. You
same
just went
deal.
super dark.
Yeah, same deal. Well, it's interesting too, now that I have a senior. I've been there now for a whole life, education of a human being. And it is sad for my mom, or, my stepdad, or other people who miss that. Like, you missed so much
Hmm.
precious, precious, precious time that, like, you won't get back. And I guess now that I'm getting older too, I really value that more, and the decisions that of giving your child away to Scientology, or sending them to boarding school so you could go be on your OT levels for 2 years or whatever. Those decisions make less and less sense to me. And
Yeah.
I think about, I did a post. There was another woman, I know your mom's story a bit, but there was another woman who, um, her daughter was packing up their stuff, and she was in Scientology, this woman, for 50 years, and was estranged from all 4 of her children for 25 years.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she
I
missed
you
everything.
Yeah, she missed everything, and then all that's left is like all this extra Scientology crap.
All these
And
boxes of Scientology CDs and crap.
yeah, extra books and
Yeah,
different iterations of garbage that Miscavige has made everybody buy.
yeah, that her kids sent back to the church. "We don't even
Mhm,
want this. We don't even want it." And they got her for, like, $175,000 or something like that.
mhm,
Um, yeah, so, it's like, at some point, you got in my opinion, when are you gonna jump ship if you're still in? Like, is that gonna be you? 'Cause that is a real consequence of being in Scientology. There is a real chance that if you are in Scientology and you get up into your 60s, 70s, 80s, you will have spent all your money. There's a real chance that you're not gonna have relationships with a good portion of people around you.
mhm.
And for what? For what?
For what? Yeah. Like, these, old women that my mother worked with, and, that she lived in this dormitory, in that complex building in, Hollywood. There was one woman that, like, died in the room. She was dying, and they rushed her to the hospital, and she passed away. She was like, she had worked until her last day. And,
That's awful.
and I asked my mom, I'm like, "Was there ever any talk about people wanting to leave or retire or all that?" Like, the general consensus of these old people, the way they had been indoctrinated to just
Mhm.
work, was that was the way to go. Literally, like, work and then die, and just, like, drop dead, and, like, then you're not a bother to anybody at that point. You can work until the last day, and then you just are gone. And then they write a little issue that
Right.
says you're granted a 21-year leave of absence, and they kind of believe that that's true.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's what L. Ron Hubbard supposedly did, right? That's the story.
Mhm,
Scientologists don't believe that he had a stroke and that he was at the end of his life and he smoked too many cigarettes and he was on drugs. Nobody believes that. They think he just sat down one day and said, "I'm done with Earth. I'm ready to go.
mhm,
Bye." And just had his spirit leave his body. Um, and so in that regard, sure, if you could just do that, be like, "I'm gonna do all my stuff, and then, Thursday at 2 o'clock, I'm done with my targets. I'm out of
mhm.
here." That's cool, but that's not how life is, and that's not how the human condition is.
No.
And at some point, our health does tip. At some point, we're on the way out, and it just
Yeah.
really, really. sucks because just like we need play at the beginning of our lives and all throughout our lives, I would hope that we are all spend our final days playing and enjoying the fruits of the labor of our lives.
Absolutely. I very much believe that that's true. Like, you can make more money. You can replace physical things.
Right.
Sometimes you can either mend or find different relationships, but you can never get your time back, and
Right.
you can never get back lost time with loved ones.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
those are things that are very finite and as a resource. And the richest people in the world, doesn't matter. You're gonna, like Tom Cruise, all the bullshit he's doing. He's gonna run out of time, just like
Yeah.
everyone else. And then what is he gonna have to show for it?
Yeah.
A
And
bunch of
his daughter,
estranged.
Suri, she's
Mhm.
looking at colleges this year. She's like 16 or 17 years old now. All that time missed, all those times of just being there with the skinned knees and the first dates and the, big, like little experiences, but big to the kid. It's like
And having
you
her
just,
period.
yeah, exactly. You just don't get that opportunity back. And I think that certain religions or groups or cultures or people really value that. And you can tell in the end of their lives that they valued their family and community and connection their whole life because they are at the end of their life surrounded by friends and family. And then you see the opposite of that. And it's really, really sad.
It is. I
Really
absolutely
sad.
agree.
On that sad note, I think could we take this super chat? And then I think my boys are about to burst in my house from basketball and it's going to get real wild.
Absolutely. We have a super chat here, and this is the Raffadaffadoo.
Raffadaffadoo? That's a cute name.
Hi, Liz. Loved your book. You're a really great writer.
Thank
Hope you
you.
write some more. I absolutely agree with that. I have
Thank you.
Liz's book is one of my stocking stuffers. I'm super, super happy
Thank you
to
so
have
much.
it. And again, I'm going to just pull up our streams here. This is mine at Mike Brown 101 on my channel. If you're interested in
Mhm.
subscribing, please do so. And by all means, please go over to Liz Gale's channel at Liz Gale
Gale,
Gale.
Gale.
And you were starting to also do some book readings, correct?
Yeah, I'm messing around with it. So I have a members area because I don't have an audiobook and I'm reading it chapter by chapter. I'm going to do 2 chapters a week. Um, yeah, we'll kind of see how it plays out. I think I have 4 members now, so I feel like hot shit. Yeah, baby.
Awesome. Good stuff.
So yeah, it's fun. Fun
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. Well, this has been fun. I'm glad we did it.
Me too. I'd be happy to do it again. I feel like we got to get on that trivia night again sometime.
We do. I may or may not be able to this week, but I definitely do. I don't, but yeah, I definitely want to get on the trivia night. We'll have to maybe team up. I know you got stuck with Aaron last time, but I think you
You
guys
really
did pretty
dragged
good,
me
right?
down. No.
You
Today.
guys won. You're the
No, it was
worst.
great. It was
It was
great. We had
good.
the worst reputation between us. So
The only outro I have is just one, like bashing on Tom Cruise.
play it.
All right.
Unless you don't want
Hey,
to. I don't
no,
care.
I do. Well,
Do
hey,
it.
this has been fun.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you
Hey,
for
we'll see
having me.
everybody next time. Take it easy. Bye.
Bye.
Being a Scientologist, when you drive past an accident, it's not like anyone else. As you drive past, you know you have to do something about it because you know you're the only one that can really help.
We were in the middle of our tournament where my friend John said he found a body in the bushes over there. I ran over there because I'm a healing monk to try and help, but obviously my magic wasn't strong enough because the dude's body was missing a head.
He or she has the ability to create new and better realities and improve conditions.
So my friend decided to try and use a necromancer spell, which didn't work, which I knew it wouldn't.
Being a Scientologist, you look at someone and you know absolutely that you can help them.
And apparently we contaminated the crime scene because that spell uses a lot of glitter.
I think it's a privilege to call yourself a Scientologist, and it's something that you have to earn. And because a Scientologist does.